Hey guys, Steve here. You are listening to one of our original 26 episodes. If you've listened to any of our new episodes, you're going to notice that we're sounding a little different in these ones.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
There is.
They've been remastered.
They have been remastered.
Because they had a really annoying hum.
Yeah, I mean, a huge thanks to listener James for doing almost all of the legwork on this
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
You'll also notice if you had listened to what we're calling the Lost 26 episodes before, and you're re-listening now, the music and sound effects are gone.
Yes, we've gone back to straight audio. So be warned, we sound a little different today than we do in what you're about to listen to.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hey there, and thanks for joining us again. This is Thinking Sideways, the podcast, and I am Steve, as always, joined by...
Joe.
And Devin.
And this week, we're going to take on yet another thing that I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
Well, this one I don't quite understand because, well, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't quite gone to this territory before, but we're going to do it anyway, is what a lot of people believe to be an urban myth.
Yeah.
Well,
And it's hard
most
with...
of what we talk about.
Well, this one, and we'll get into the details of it and the name of it, but when you get into a lot of things on the net, it seems like you find a pretty solid opinion one way or the other. It's, oh, that's real, or, oh, no, total urban myth. Even Snopes on this one has said, oh, no, this is a total urban myth.
Mm-hmm.
Except my problem is as I read it, I thought that, and then I came across some details that started making me think that maybe there's some gems of truth in it. So what the heck? We're going to run down that road.
I'm really
Yeah,
excited.
okay.
This is like opening up new territory for us. This
It
is
is.
like nothing like we've done yet. No,
Boldly going where no show has gone before.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe some shows, but our
This show has gone before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not any show that I've ever listened to. So that's the main thing.
So no show ever.
So no show has ever done this before.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tonight we're going to talk about Polybius. If you
Wait, like the Greek philosopher?
No.
Oh.
No, not that guy.
Oh.
Polybius, which is supposedly a arcade game that came out in 1981.
Oh.
So we're going to step into a little time machine here because not everybody understands this, and we're going to go back to 1981. And when you played a video game, you had to go to an arcade because they were the stand-up machines. It was pinball and stand-up arcade games. There was
Yeah.
almost no home video games.
1981, hardly anybody had a home computer.
Well, and Atari I don't even know that the Atari gaming system had come out. If it had, it was still in its infancy.
They were really expensive.
They were very expensive.
And to hook it up to your TV, to have a TV that was compatible with something like that, also crazy expensive.
Correct, because
Yeah.
old tube TVs
No
did not
way.
have a bazillion ports on the back of them.
Well, and they weren't digital, so you had to get a demodulator and a modulator, whatever. You could actually interface those things, but you had to buy this box to do it with.
Right. So some had
And
it,
then
some didn't.
And it was kind of fuzzy and crappy looking too.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
wasn't easy to do. Playing video games meant you had a roll of quarters in your pocket and you went down to the arcade. Mm-hmm. That's just how it happened. I remember many a time begging money off of my parents. Can I have a couple of bucks so I can go play video games? Yeah, go. I mean, that's just the way it was. So we're going to talk about Polybius. And let's go ahead. The story, because it's considered an urban legend or an urban myth, there are a lot of variants and versions of it out there, and I'm going to do my best to try and wade through those, but let's just get the basic story to start with.
Yeah.
And then we'll build from there.
Okay.
All right. So according to this story, an unnamed arcade here in Portland, Oregon, in 1981 got a new game, Polybius.
Now, was it one or was it several? I heard it was several.
Well, you just right off the bat,
Uh-huh.
I've heard both ways. I've heard it was one arcade. I've heard it was multiple arcades in this city. I've heard that they were all in the suburbs, and I've heard that there was a couple that showed up in other towns on the other side of the country.
Yeah, and we should, make a point of saying it was like an unknown game, but that was really rare. I mean, if you were going to get a new arcade game, you were telling everybody about it. you were saying, oh yeah, we're finally going to get this, you wanted to build hype around it.
Yeah, but I also got the impression that this might have been a beta test situation.
Yeah.
If they only build a certain number of game cabinets, then that would explain, well, we've just got to try it out and see how it does, and then we'll take it back to the shop and make our changes and then do our big marketing dump.
Probably not a bad idea to just stick some out there and see if people like them or not.
I guess. I just feel like, even at that, in beta testing, you, as an arcade, kind of say, oh, we're getting this beta. The amount of people that would come out for this thing, you say, this is one of 4 units in existence. Come play this game before anybody else. So to have it just kind of appear mysteriously is like the first little question mark, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's keep going here. It turns out this game was super popular and from many accounts, almost addictive. People were lining up, playing it like mad nonstop. In at least one arcade, according to these accounts of it being released, the owner of that arcade said that he noticed, and I'm using air quotes, men in black hanging around, watching the players, watching their reactions, going to the machines, not collecting money, but doing something on the inside of the machine, and then walking away, which is weird.
Well, and I got to say, I really have a hard time believing that because, are you really going to send some guys like, with pork pie hats and black suits and skinny ties to an arcade full of teenagers and young people? Come on. Of course, this is the government, so maybe, but still.
I think throughout history, you get these reports. A lot of conspiracy theories or urban legends have these like mysterious men in black characters. And I think that it's often used as a term, not as like an actual description of these people.
So it's possible, that these guys were actually casually dressed.
Yeah, and it could be that they weren't in jeans and ratty T-shirts and 18.
Yeah,
they just
were
look like
adults.
They look like 35-year-old FBI agents in in sweatshirts.
Right. Yeah. I picture the like Steve Buscemi as a teenager in an episode where Steve Buscemi plays a personal investigator, private eye. And he says something about, he was doing an undercover thing in high school, and it just shows him in a high school, like literally just Steve Buscemi, but like wearing kids' clothes with like a skateboard. He's like, hey, dudes and dudettes, like, what are we doing tonight? So I feel like that's like also totally feasible. Men in Black, right? It's just like dudes who are like, oh no, we're 13.
Yeah,
clearly in their 30s.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. I shaved my hair this high up on my forehead.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I got it.
No, I dye it gray, man. It's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
But it could have been not necessarily the Men in Black, but just men from the corporation that built these things.
Yeah, I
just wanted to see what
they could be
what
some kind of businessman of some kind. Again, this is as with this, it's rife with possibilities for plausible reasons or implausible ones.
If you've built these machines and you've got them out there for testing purposes to see how people like them, it makes sense to go by the arcade and just see what people are doing.
Yeah.
Easy.
Absolutely. So this is where things go a little sideways. No pun intended. For this particular show. So evidently, according to the allegations in the multiple versions that you come across, the machines were having psychoactive effects on players. So they were having amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, suicidal tendencies, like all this crazy behavior.
I feel like it should also be mentioned that in every account that happens, right? That's consistent throughout almost every account.
It is, except here's why I don't put a lot of credence in it's in every account, because the order of those things written is always identical. It's A, B, C, D.
So you think there's a little cutting and pasting going on there?
Cut and paste going on.
There seems to be a lot of that on the internet. But I again, and this is one of the things that makes me scratch my head, is how did they find out that these people suffered from, say, amnesia?
That's a very good question. Dude, I don't know where I am. Where am I? Well, I'm missing $10 in quarters. Where? I don't know. It's,
The crowd pulls the kid away, right? Because they're like, they all want to play the game too. It's finally he's died like a million times in a row, and he like wakes up from a trance and it like can't remember doing it. That's, quantifiable and reportable as amnesia, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely possible.
Yeah,
although insomnia.
The insomnia again is a kind of a tricky one.
Yeah.
Unless they did interviews with these kids.
I assume that these are all just like accounts, right? Like
correct.
Kids being like, I couldn't sleep last night. That game is messing me up or whatever.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So here's where things really go bad is according to the story, the game was pulled out of the arcades within weeks of having been installed because one player, it's supposedly a boy, had an epileptic seizure from playing the game.
Yikes.
Which might not even be related to the game. I mean, maybe he was just spazzed out.
It's possible. And we'll get into some descriptions of what happens on screen as to why it could have caused a seizure. But it's believed that basically he had a seizure and whoever made the game just in a panic pulled it and it disappeared. And
so, yeah,
it's gone. There's never been a cabinet, physically inspected and people like, look, right here, this is Polybius. We've got it. Mm-hmm. There's some photos on the net. Again, we're going to get into some of that stuff, but the story itself is really the main basis that we've got to operate from.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's one of the reasons I'm kind of doubting this story.
Right off the bat.
Because the people that made this thing, I mean, would somebody would have held on to it as a souvenir or whatever, or maybe all of it. One of those machines should have showed up on eBay by now, don't you think?
Well, if there were like 7, right? I mean, you assume if you have decided as a game manufacturer, no, we're pulling this for good. Right? They made their cabinets, but the cabinets all kind of look the same. Mm-hmm. And if they are making other games, they either repurpose it or just
slap
destroy
another set of stickers
or,
on it and put a new motherboard in it, and away you go.
Yeah,
because I think that saves a lot of money, honestly.
Oh, yeah, I mean it would, but and I'm assuming if these were prototypes, they were probably in generic boxes. But the thing is, somebody would have saved all the guts, and they would have shown up somewhere. Like one time, for example, I bought an Asteroids machine years ago, and it was this guy who had everything but the box. He had like the power supply and the motherboard and the control board and the monitor and everything except the box, the cabinet. And I bought it from this guy, and I played Asteroids for years on this thing. I built a crude box to put it in. So somebody still has those guts somewhere if the game ever existed.
Maybe. I guess I just think that like if you have a game that causes seizures and maybe a bunch of other stuff, you maybe just destroy it. I mean,
again, you want to recoup your cost, you repurpose it, like you said.
Right.
So it's hard to say. But the original story says that this happened in 1981. The story itself didn't surface until August of 1998. So that's 17 years later?
Yeah.
Suddenly the story just pops up on the internet. The story comes up on a forum, which is coinop.org, which evidently is a big gaming forum. I looked around a little bit on it, but I'm not a forum guy, so I didn't really know what I was doing.
It's a forum, not a repository of any kind.
I'm not positive. It might be. I think that in the reading, like CoinOp got bought by somebody else, and so I think that like the old archives are held. I wasn't clear, and I couldn't get a direct line of sight on.
Well, and to be fair, the internet in '98 is way different than the internet now.
This is true.
And I think it's likely, right? It may have been a forum, but they're just like really basic forums. But I guess the impression I kind of have is that it's just like a repository of ROMs, basically. You download the game you want to play and you just play it on your computer.
That's what CoinOp is.
I got the impression that CoinOp was originally basically a BBS,
just a BBS.
Yeah, an old school BBS. But again, I don't know. But here's what happens: is this original story comes out. There's almost no information about the history of the game. They just say that it's a space shooter / abstract puzzle game. It's named after a Greek historian. And I mean, honestly, it doesn't lend itself to a whole lot of credibility right off the bat from that. And everybody on the internet from day one has ripped this thing to shreds, and that's continued to happen. I mean, if you do, ladies and gentlemen, if you go out and you search for information on this game and you type it into Google, you're going to come up with a gazillion hits on it. And you're going to find people who say it's fake. You're going to find people who say it's real. You're going to find some guy who says he's got it in his mom's basement. I mean, it's everywhere. Okay, well, the forums aside, let's just walk through some of the details that have been put out there. And again, I'm putting air quotes around the word details, but the things that I have found that people say about the game. And we'll start with, how does the game work?
Yeah.
What is the game? Because that's, I mean, it's a game. That's kind of the first thing is, what is it?
And there's some conflicting data on that too, isn't there?
There's data all over the map on every point that I'm going to bring up in here. And that's the hard part. And bear with us, folks, because there are some things that we are hanging on till the end that maybe tie some of this together. But, okay, so according to the information that I've come across, the game was either an action puzzle game that had a rotating 3D puzzle that had logic puzzles in it, and it had a maze built in it. Kind of like, do you remember Pac-Man, the original Pac-Man, how you had to run through the maze? That's what they mean by a maze. Not, in these new games where you're first-person shooter going through these crazy mazes where you can only see ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is 1981, so we're still probably looking at 2D graphics and very simple.
Yes, absolutely simple graphics. The second, B, is that you're flying through a tunnel and you have to dodge things that are in your path. And as you get farther through the game, things start going faster and lights on the screen begin to flash, almost in a strobing effect.
So not like that one. That reminds me a lot of Space Age and Dragon Quest or whatever, right? That like you dodge
Space Ace
stuff.
and Dragon Slayer.
Yeah,
Yes.
Dragon Slayer. Where you like just go through and dodge stuff. Are we talking something like that? Or are we talking?
No, we're talking generations before that. That came out much later. We're talking about more of, you've got a T junction ahead and you've got to hold the joystick to the left until you get to that junction, and then it's up or down.
Oh, and you're flying through a thing. It's
right,
not
and
like
I think that the graphics on the screen maybe are rotating for that, but this is my guess.
Sure.
So this is kind of almost 3D graphics then.
It's in some of the stuff that I came across. Most video games of the time, if you think of, everybody's seen Super Mario Brothers. And the original arcade of Super Mario Brothers or Donkey Kong, they were in raster graphics, which is just little pixels that turn on to paint an image.
Little 8-bit, yeah.
Right, little 8-bit images. Well, there is discussion that Polybius was a vector graphics game, which is more along the lines of, if you remember, like you said, Joe, Asteroids. There was a game, and we're going to talk about it later on, but Battlezone?
Battlezone is what I was thinking of, because that was also an Atari game, which came out not too long after Asteroids, and that was actually a 3D game.
Yeah, and if you haven't heard of any of these games, take a minute and just do a Google image search, and you'll see what we mean by simplistic line graphic work. And vector graphics, and this is kind of a computer thing in terms of how things work, but vector graphics are smaller and easier to render than raster would be. So if your game can do these in vector, then it's faster, especially with a processor in 1980 or 81, which is, compared to today's standards, a snail.
Yeah.
It's going to be able to go faster, which is going to be revolutionary for anybody who they've never seen this happen before. So I've heard discussions that it was some experiment to use the vector graphic format. If that's right or not, I don't know.
So we're not talking like just an animated sequence, because that's all that like Space Age was really, I mean, that in terms of programming, it wasn't much more complex than Pac-Man or anything like that. It was just that they had done these like full animated scenes.
Correct.
So we're talking like
really
simple,
basic.
Okay.
Extremely basic. Again, Pong was kind of still, the grandfather of all of these games at that time.
Oh my God, Pong! I'm still waiting for the movie, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Another game that was kind of vector based, and this comes up in the research saying that maybe this was based upon it. Is Atari put out a game called Tempest? And I know that we've watched the video of how Tempest works, which is, it's vector graphics and you're kind of sliding around the edges of a maze, avoiding things and shooting stuff. People say that it could have been based on that or a beta version of that, because Tempest, according to everything, came out about 4 to 6 months after this supposedly hit portless.
So now the image that I have in my brain is, in Star Wars when he has his little guiding thing come down where he's gonna do, and it's
and he's in the trench.
Yeah, when he's in the trench, that's now in my brain.
And
that's what that's like.
That's basically what the graphics were. It's that level of sophistication,
and it's moving, quote unquote, right past you. And I guess if that were going fast enough and you were trying to dodge things and there were lights flashing at you, okay. I'm getting a good picture here. Yeah. Okay.
Sounds like a fun game. I want to play.
And none of these games that we've talked about so far are anything that would give someone a seizure. But I did watch, and I know, again, I put this up, and I know you guys have watched it. There's a current game out there. What was that? Super Hexagon. It's a game that basically flashes, and everything's rotating and spinning. If it was in line with that, and again, ladies and gentlemen, you might want to Google this. You might want to just take a pause.
This one especially, you should,
Pause this, go watch it for a minute and a half, and then come back to us.
We'll wait.
Actually, for anybody, if you do have epilepsy, you probably don't want to go watch that one, because that would be a bad thing.
Yeah.
So everybody else go look.
So welcome back.
Yep. That was crazy to watch. I know.
Yeah.
Now you kind of get how somebody could have a seizure, because it's not easy to watch that stuff flashing around.
Yeah, and then imagine playing it. You're just passively watching it. Imagine, trying to be in charge of that thing.
Oh,
I would imagine that you'd be, seasick after a while.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that going well.
No, it's not just watching. It makes me dizzy.
Yeah. So let's move forward into Polybius.
Oh, Polybius.
The actual person, Polybius.
The Greek historian?
Yes, because the name of the game is based upon a real person. And Polybius lived, the actual guy, he was a Greek historian, lived in 264 to 146 BC.
Okay.
He was a historian. He had some views on how things should be recorded, which is fine. But really, what I like about this guy, and I didn't really know about him until I started doing the research, is he was one of the first. He came up with an early cryptographic system to use for communications over long distance.
Oh.
So it's called the Polybius Square.
Okay.
And what it is you take a grid of 5 across and 5 down. And you start in the upper left-hand square, and you put A, B, C, D, and E, and then you go down to the next line. And there's 26 letters in the alphabet, so he combined I and J into the same one.
Yeah.
If you're communicating over a long distance, you can use flashes of some kind, and you know that the first number is going to be the top of the grid, and the second number is going to be on the vertical axis of that grid, and then you put them together, and you know it's B, and then E, and so on. And you can build sentences so that great distances, which again, I mean, it would have taken me a week to write over there, but it took me an hour to transmit the message using flares.
Sure.
Much simpler.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's referenced. Maybe it's because of the fact that this is supposed to be some kind of puzzle game. But I couldn't really make the tie together myself.
Didn't they say on one account of it that it was like a rotating square that was like
puzzles?
Like a
3D puzzle.
Yeah, so maybe it was in a reference to that.
But the other reference that I was thinking about was that he was also, besides being a cryptographer, he was an historian. And one of his things was he felt that any historian should never put anything into the historical record without actually interviewing somebody and finding out if it was true or not. You know, which when you think about it, it might be, you know, like this whole thing. If
kind of the gag of this whole story.
Exactly. So,
man. So, okay, already, even in the name, right, we're like, we've got two different directions, right? I have found a way that this references what the game is, and it totally makes sense. And Joe has found a way
to discount the whole
totally
thing.
discount the whole thing.
Yeah. Somebody was playing a joke, and the name of the game is itself part of the joke. It's a broad hint as to what this story is all about, really.
Well, and
So-
that's a great segue into the next bit of data that I want to go into, which would be who made the game.
Mm-hmm.
We don't
government.
know. We don't know who made it. Atari and Sega were kind of the big boys on the block when it came to video games at this time.
Right.
They were the superpowers.
They also would have been the ones that would have had the resources to say, here's 7 boxes, let's go beta test them.
And to develop. I mean, they had the R&D money. They were creating all of these games, so they totally had the money to just, let's try this too.
As opposed to a small indie label that's just going to do the one thing that they know works.
And plus, they had the money to send ex-Marines in sweatshirts around to watch the kids play the game. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conjecture that one of these two major labels made it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a image going around on the internet of the title screen of the game. And actually, I'll be honest, I've seen 3 different images of the game. I've seen the title screen. I've seen a black and white of the cabinet itself. And I have supposedly seen images of the city of Portland's, the licensing stickers for it to be put into an arcade and played.
I feel like I want to see these pictures. Also, I want to talk to the person who licensed.
Did you? Yeah, I wasn't even aware that you have to have a license, like a license sticker on an arcade
so
game.
people don't have epileptic fits. They're supposed to test
I
these
have
things.
seen stickers on games. I'm assuming it's licensing. Again, here's the problem. I don't know if it's from this game. I don't even know if it belongs to a video game. And I don't even know if they're real. I have just seen these. But
I've got to go to an arcade now and check out the machines.
good luck finding one.
Yeah. There's still a few around.
There's still a few. Not many, but a few.
I know the city, they license things like cigarette machines. I know they do that kind of stuff, but I'm not sure about arcade games. I mean, actually, I wouldn't put it past them.
You know what? I've seen stickers on games that look like they're officially issued, so I'm presuming that at least in this city that happens. But I don't know exactly what they're for. But what I'm saying is that I cannot say these are real because they're the same 3 ones over and over. People have tried to check for photoshopping and all this stuff. The title screen of Polybius, it is 8-bit graphics, so it is from that era. It looks like it's from that era. On the title screen, there is a name from a company, and Joe, you're going to have to help me out with this. How do you say this?
Sinneschlüssen. It's German.
It's German, and in German, that means deletion or erasure of senses, as in your senses of the world. So,
Actually, I think I mispronounced that. Sorry.
Okay.
Sinneschlüssen.
Okay.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But there's no record of this company.
Yeah.
We don't know who this company is. Nobody can find them. They don't seem to exist currently, and there's no records of them, putting out other games or anything like that.
So I'm going to find my German dictionary, but I'm guessing right now that this word means Men in Black. Or government conspiracy. I'm not sure. One or the other.
There is another direction that we can take for who created it, which is there supposedly is a guy named CyberNogi or CyberNogi. I'm not exactly positive. Get on the enunciation
I'd
of
say
that.
Nogi.
Nogi,
I'm going for Nogi.
That's how I would.
Yeah,
all right. Well,
yeah.
CyberNogi is, according to Usenet members, which
Usenet. Remember Usenet?
yeah, well, according to Usenet, CyberNogi created Polybius. And CyberNogi is a German programmer, and people believe that he or she, I should say, created the game as an April Fool's joke. Evidently, CyberNogi's been known to put out April Fool's jokes to people on the net.
So he created the game, or he created the legend of the game?
Created the whole thing, as in made the whole thing
So
up
he made the
as
story
a gag
up.
for
Yeah.
April Fools.
Yeah.
But here's the problem is that, okay, well, people say, okay, well, I think he did it. And then here's the stories. But I haven't seen any research, and I couldn't find anything that would link the two together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's kind of, oh, that jerk does that stuff all the time. I'll bet that jerk did this.
Does that jerk
Cybernaut.
usually take credit for his April Fool pranks?
I don't believe so.
Huh.
That's the thing, is that people will eventually come back and say, we're outing you as the one who did that. Whatever. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah, besides which, it's not exactly an arrestable offense. But
It's
okay,
Not
okay.
at all.
So next week this will be a 2-part episode. We are going to fly to Germany personally and subject Cybernogi to some intensive interrogation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
We
pry
could
the
do
truth
that,
out of him.
or we could just keep going.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We should
Okay.
probably just keep going.
Yeah. Let's just keep going.
Well, okay.
Okay.
I want to go to Germany,
I know you do.
and I
know
really want
you
to
do.
electrocute somebody.
No.
No, only if you use the Baghdad battery. Okay. We're going to move forward into the places that it could have been released, so where the game cabinet actually go. I've come across a couple of bits of information that say there was an arcade here in Portland called Backwater Alleys, which evidently is closed down long ago.
Mhm.
They're reported as one of the places that supposedly got the game cabinet. Another one is Blue Diamond, which is still around, but Blue Diamond is actually a bar now.
I mean, it's possible, but I mean, that place is a bar restaurant. It's got a full kitchen and a full bar and everything. And I suppose at some point somebody might have.
Supposedly the building was renovated in the 90s, and
Okay.
that's when it became a bar.
And
So we
how-
got Blue Diamond. I've seen reports that say that it was in Gresham, Oregon, which is just outside of the city of Portland.
Uh-huh.
Because again, the story says it was released in suburbs, so Gresham could be a plausible candidate. But then
Uh-huh.
again, I've also heard that it was released in Kansas, which
Yeah.
is not a suburb of Portland.
Yeah.
Shockingly,
Yeah.
it's
You
not.
know, they're so close together.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah.
I don't know where it's at.
Yeah. What, are you talking about Blue Diamond?
No, I'm saying I don't
Or-
know
or-
where it was released at.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't know exactly where this thing was at.
Yeah, they did say suburbs, and I don't know why. I don't know why they picked the suburbs.
I don't either.
You know?
It's kind of an odd place to say.
Well, the thing about it is, if you put it in various suburban places, then your men in black are going to have to drive farther distances to go out there and monitor the teenagers playing it.
Maybe.
I would think you'd want to keep them close in.
Maybe.
I
Reduce
I
commute
think
times.
suburbs make sense because
That's where the kids are at.
that's where the kids are. That's where the bored kids are.
Mhm.
But it's also, if you do want to keep it under wraps, right? It's not like the most central hub.
Mm-hmm.
There's not as many kids
Keep them
around.
far
Not as
away.
much exposure,
They're
so you-
dispersed. They're
Yeah.
dispersed far.
So if you
apart.
decide to
Yeah.
pull it after a couple weeks, you can just pull it and it won't be like this massive outcry.
Yeah.
Not that Portland was giant in the 80s,
No.
but it'd be less of an outcry at least.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And
Yeah.
I want to jump to a point that we've talked about before, which I know we were talking about the pictures of the cabinet and the title screen and all that, because that's how we got the name of the company. One of the things that I couldn't ever come to grips with when it came to this title screen shot is, how did somebody get it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the thing. Remember these cabinets, it's a glass face with a video monitor underneath the case, and it's a CRT monitor. It's old school monitor. So even using 35 millimeter film, the screen rolls, you're not going to get a good clear image. And these images that are put up of this title screen,
They look like screenshots.
they look like screenshots. So how did somebody get this screenshot
Yeah.
if the machine was only out there for a very short time?
Yeah,
So
although I guess to counter that,
Mhm.
in terms of things that are coming up in my brain right
Yeah.
now, why choose Portland for your hoax place? What a weird place to pick as a hoax place.
it really is.
Okay, some tiny town in the middle of Kansas. Okay, sure, right? Or some really big metropolitan hub,
like
sure.
New York or something.
But
Yeah,
Portland, Oregon in the 80s is the weirdest, literally the weirdest spot that you could pick, I feel like.
Well, it still is, even in
I guess
the
more
the
now,
21st century,
there's
but-
more people here.
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
more hipsters.
But it was
there's
a bit more of a backwater back in those days.
Yeah.
But it wasn't totally backwards. So it's
No.
just, to me, it's such a weird
It's unusual.
place.
It's not where you would normally want to go to market something
So
for
that-
its first
Mhm.
run.
but it's also not the kind of place that you would pick as a hoax,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you were going to pick a place to start a hoax.
Well, that is an interesting
story.
point. Is that you would think that people generally, when they're making up stories about America, the story is set in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, or Los Angeles.
Or
You know,
some tiny place nobody's ever
or
heard
maybe
of.
Miami.
Or
Right.
somewhere
Or-
in the
or
middle of
some-
Iowa or
Yeah.
something
Or
like Devin's saying.
some strange,
Some
quirky
small
little town
place
called
in-
Silent Hill
yeah,
or
or
something like
something.
that.
Yeah.
Some creepy little place. Yeah.
Again,
yeah. So that's kind of
another,
interesting. That's-
Another question mark on this whole
Yeah.
thing. This whole thing so far, and I don't know if you two have gotten this impression, but there's just question marks all over the place, written in red ink for
Yeah.
me. What? Huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
I totally agree with that. And I think, it's like as much evidence that I feel like disproves it, there's also like
That flip
almost
side.
the exact same amount of evidence
Almost
that is
enough
proving
to
it.
make it say, well, I
Yeah.
can see it actually happening.
Plausible, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're like halfway through, right? We
Yeah.
haven't even gotten halfway through this
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. We got a ways to go, and we're going to move on to Joe's favorite subject, which is the supposed Men in Black.
Oh,
Mm.
yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing: is that it is not unheard of for the government to get involved with games, to use them as a way to find people with abilities to try to recruit them. Battlezone that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, which anybody who doesn't know what Battlezone is, it's this old cabinet game where you put your face into a periscope and you drove a tank around and you were blasting enemy tanks and driving around.
Yeah, and Flying Saucers would also swoop in, and you have to blast them too.
Right.
So do you know what that thing was before it became a video game?
I heard it was a Bradley troop carrier.
Yes, it
simulator.
was a training module for Bradley carriers or
Uh-huh.
tanks. So
Yeah.
this is what soldiers did before they went out in the field, is they learned to drive the tank in a VR situation.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
airplane pilots do it to this day. They use,
Yeah.
Yeah.
flight simulators that are open to the public.
Yeah.
People do use them in like a less sophisticated sense. But this has been a thing forever. That's how you train.
Rainbow Six, when that first came out, evidently the scores and stuff like that were being fed back to the army or the military.
So,
is
Rainbow-
what I've heard. And again, I can't validate this.
Was
but
that
I've
an
heard
online
this.
game?
It was an. Gosh, what was that on? It was a PlayStation game or something like that. It came out a good number of years ago, but supposedly you could register scores. So I don't know. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I hear these things.
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
But it's not unheard of.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of creepy stories of, I played this sniper game, and when I got to the end, the phone number came up, and I called the phone number, and it was the Secret Service, and they offered me a job. I don't know.
I tend to, I mean, I'm totally on board with the sinister government theory, but at the same time, I'm totally on board with the incompetent government theory.
Yeah.
And I don't think they had the brains to come up with ideas like this.
Well, but here's the thing. Okay, let's just say that somebody was collecting data out of the machines.
Yeah.
What could you get out of a 1981 video game processor besides the high score?
Well, okay.
They're not that sophisticated.
Yeah, I
they
mean-
can't
Sure.
record video. They can't record audio. So, I mean, is it just they're doing duration and score? I mean, it doesn't seem like you could get that much information.
The data you could get out of it would be like, maybe how often it was played and how much it was played. You can get that kind of stuff. But of course, if you're sending Men in Black around to just like skulk in the shadows and watch the kids play, and they're noticing the kids lining up around the block to play this game, they don't really need to download the data about how frequently the game was played.
Yeah,
they know it's
I
a big
think,
hit.
Actually, to me, the idea of them just like hanging around makes way more sense than the idea of them coming to collect data. I guess maybe if they saw someone that was like playing it a lot, they would want to know what your high score was or something like that. But I think this seems much more like a situation where they would want to know how it was affecting people more than they would want to know about high scores or how long it was
Yeah.
played or anything
So-
like that.
Yeah.
The machine itself wouldn't give you that information. I
Right.
mean, now it's okay, let's go with the sinister government again.
Yeah.
And let's say, okay, it's plausible that they had some kind of video recorder, and it would have been a video recorder,
Uh-huh.
would have been on tape in the box, filming everybody who was playing it. So
Yeah.
they were going and changing the tape,
Yeah.
literally changing the tape.
Yeah. I
And
guess
it could have been too. They might have been like the handles that we used for playing the game. maybe they had galvanic response mechanisms built into them, so they could actually probably download.
Wait, what is that?
They could actually from what's going on in the electrical currents in your skin, they can tell what's going on with your nervous system.
Oh,
and so
in the 80s they can.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
But again, these are Men in Black, so they probably had some sophisticated tools that the rest of us didn't have back in those days.
I guess
I think what it really was. Should I save my summation of what I think it really was until the end?
Yes.
Okay, let's start.
I think it makes sense to me that if you're going to send some agents to stand and watch behavior, if they say, "Oh yeah, we're techs for this thing, and we're going to have to go in once a day just to make sure it's working," that's a great cover story for why they're hanging out all day instead of "Oh, we're just here watching the kids."
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's better to say, "Oh yeah, we have to open it up once a day."
Yeah.
For no good reason except for to have a good cover story. I don't know. Sinister government. There's all this.
Yes.
I mean.
All right. So the machine disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was taken away.
It was taken away.
And probably executed.
And probably had a blindfold, got a cigarette, and put it in front of a firing range.
Yeah, sorry, Polybius, you suck.
Well, now everybody is saying, well, where's the ROM of it? Which, if you don't know, a ROM is read-only memory. It's a game you can download and play on your computer. And they do remakes of all these old games.
Dude, this is my favorite thing in the entire world, ROMs.
Really?
ROMs are cool.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time playing my all-time favorite game, which is a SNES game that you can only play on your computer now. I mean, unless you have an SNES. So
which one?
It's Earthbound.
Never heard of that one.
Oh, it's so good. We'll have this discussion later.
I need to get the ROM for Asteroids.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, so a ROM is a recreation of the game.
Yeah.
And there have been, just like everything else, a bunch of, I've got a ROM of the game.
Okay, let's see it. Oh, I lost it.
It got deleted. Or the most famous one out there is everybody would get this ROM and it would load the title screen that was on the internet. Mm-hmm. It would make this weird noise and then it would crash.
Mm.
Okay, so I have a big problem with this. Again, saying, I love ROMs. There aren't a lot of ROMs for things that have been only arcade games because
that's really hard to translate.
It's really hard to translate. Mm. So, 99%, yes, this is a made up statistic, but the majority of the ROMs out there are games that have been on console.
They've been translated by the company that made it.
Of any kind. So games that exist solely in arcade box format. Mm-hmm. I know this because I have an arcade game that I'm obsessed with and literally can play for hours. And I wanted to find the ROM of it one time, and I do this a bunch of research, and it comes out that unless it's been released on a console, your likelihood of finding a ROM of it is none. Mm. Yeah, it's just not going to happen because it's so hard to translate.
That makes me sad.
Into a ROM.
It's now I can't
I'm sure
find
somebody's
Asteroids.
just somebody reprogrammed.
I'm sure somebody has. It's so freaking classic. How could you not?
Well, and it's easy.
Yeah, that's true. It's a pretty simple little game.
Yeah. So, but with something like this, my belief of a ROM existing in any capacity is very low.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize. Quite obviously, we're geeking out on video games.
Yeah, maybe we are.
Sorry.
No.
Sort of
I've been holding back not to just run down that road.
We've sort of headed off into the weeds, haven't we?
We did.
Yes, we have.
Here's the thing. If this is a ROM, it should work. And we're going to go back to the big bad government conspiracy theory.
Ooh, yeah.
People have said, well, it's a direct translation, but of course the hardware in a PC doesn't work like the hardware in the actual machine does, so it can't do the mind control voodoo, so it crashes.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
I know that.
I'm so sorry. Anyone, I'm so sorry.
It does not hold water for me, but it is funny that I see this. Now, I also will say that there are a bunch of people who say they have ROMs that aren't actual ROMs, because what they've done is they've taken the descriptions of the game and then they've recreated it the way they think it would have been.
Yeah, which is really interesting to me, actually.
It is interesting, and I've watched them,
Uh-huh.
and
But-
I got to be honest, it looks like a lame game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on the way people have built it.
Uh-huh.
It also, again, I can see why you get a seizure because
And-
it's nothing
Right.
but flashing lights and moray patterns.
Yeah, and and that's the other thing too, is that perhaps this game actually existed. Perhaps they did put some beta versions in arcades, and perhaps it was just so lame that nobody played it, and that's why it disappeared forever.
Yeah,
Could
and
be.
that
Yeah.
the whole urban myth of like people
Lining
lining
up around the block
has
to
just
see
kind
it.
of been the
Yeah,
built up version
yeah.
of it.
Could
Maybe.
be.
Yeah,
Could be.
could have been just a really lame game.
Or it seems lame to us because, like, our games now are super
so
awesome.
Grand
awesome.
Theft Auto
Yeah, I know.
18.
Right, but like, and again, we were talking about like this whole introduction of vector graphics and maybe, it was super flashing lights and everything, and you just kind of like got carried away with it. And the reason it was addictive was because you were so busy like paying attention to the flashing lights that like you sucked at the game.
Mhm.
Right? It's just like these graphics are so cool. What's going on here? And then you die a million times.
So far, we have a lot of information that basically is uncorroborated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at this point in my research, I would have dumped this story.
Mm.
Except there's one character that we haven't talked about.
Santa.
Not Santa.
Oh.
It's a guy by the name of Stephen Roach.
Oh.
Well,
Stephen Roach, he is based out of the Czech Republic.
Okay.
In March of 2006, he went on a bunch of forums and he made a post. And it's the same post. He literally cut and pasted. He wrote this thing up and cut and pasted it every time.
Yeah.
mhm.
He claims that he was involved in the creation of Polybius
Mhm.
Oh.
and has a bunch of details about the game and its history in terms of how it was made, why it was made, where all of this stuff, which we're going to go into.
Mhm.
Okay.
I will say right now that there is a lot of doubt cast upon the validity of this guy's story.
Okay.
People have picked it apart. He's done some interviews and people have turned around and said, well, it's pretty funny. His answers almost exactly match what was on the Wikipedia page about this.
Mhm.
Okay, well, the problem is Wikipedia is constantly changing.
Right.
And
He
so
could
it
have
be-
updated it.
He could have updated, or somebody could have read his details, put them on the wiki page, and then everybody else go, oh, well, that's weird. They match.
Right.
Mm.
Almost word for word.
Yeah.
True that.
So,
Yeah.
take
And
that-
he could
take this
have
with a grain
actually
of salt.
he could actually have edited the wiki page himself and put
Yeah.
that stuff in there.
Yeah, he could have been an updater on it.
I guess
You never know.
my big question is like, why wait till 2006?
Well,
You know?
we'll get into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just start at the beginning. So Joe, help me again. What is the name? How do you pronounce this?
Actually, they're spelling it differently now.
Sinschlossen?
Yeah, it's Zinneschlossen.
Okay.
And actually, this is the spelling is different.
Well,
And-
that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
But
Because this is how he
Yeah.
pronounces it or
Okay,
writes it
Sinneschlossen.
versus the internet.
yeah,
But he said this was a company that he and a couple other amateur programmers had put together in 1978. And they were approached in 1980 by a South American company that he wouldn't give the name of for legal reasons, I guess.
Uh-huh.
They paid him. He probably signed an NDA, a
Yeah.
non-disclosure agreement. So he's keeping his mouth shut on that, which is understandable. They came and said that they wanted an arcade game made that was going to use puzzle elements, but as we talked about before, they wanted to use vector graphics.
Mm.
Okay, well, this all makes sense so far. So they make this puzzle game, and it's got all this different stuff going on, things that haven't been seen in video games, and they're all agog. They're really excited. And then the game gets released by this company.
Mm-hmm.
One of the places he says that there were 7 cabinets made.
Okay.
One of the places here in Portland, Oregon that he says it was released was the Lloyd District.
Okay, wait. I'm just going to go back to like my previous statement about like Portland being a weird place to pick, right? And then like furthermore, the Lloyd District, especially in the 80s, was kind of a dump.
Well, yeah.
I'm trying to find like a good word for that. And I feel like
It
I
wasn't
can
a
say
great
that.
neighborhood.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was born in 1987 in the Lloyd District.
Uh-huh.
So in the 90s it was a dump. In the 80s it was a dump. And and it's not even like a very well publicized area of Portland.
Mm-hmm.
So for somebody to be creating a hoax by saying, oh, it's Portland, and then to like further it by saying, oh, and it was in the Lloyd district, like that's such an obscure place to say something like
that's a little
was
mysterious.
put.
Although, finish your
No,
thought.
I just feel like, I think for whatever reason, I feel like it leads credence to the story.
Well, interestingly too, the Blue Diamond, which is now a bar, is kind of on the southern periphery of the Lloyd district.
Okay.
Yeah,
There you
that's,
go.
yeah. No.
So there again, weird things stitched together in
Yeah.
the story.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay.
So he goes on to say that about a week, or not even a week after the game was put out, and evidently, the kids were lining up, they were all enjoying it, and then a 13-year-old boy has an epileptic seizure while playing the game. So all the executives are freaking out because they think that, oh God, we've made the worst thing in the world. We're going to give people seizures. Before they pull it, of course, now word gets out, according to Roach, that word gets out, and now this is a fun game to play. It's teenage boys daring their buddies to go play it, or their buddies going, I'm tough, I'll play it, it won't hurt me, which does not help the image of the game.
Sure.
So
of course.
this is all bad.
And he said he say that they had play tested it for like a really long time as adults.
All the
as
adults
the developers
really enjoyed it, but didn't have any of this reaction. But
sure,
they may not have had, they may not have been epileptic.
They probably weren't, but I think that's the big question, right? Is that like if an epileptic person plays something that's got flashing lights, they are probably going to have a seizure, and it's probably not the fault of the game.
No, probably not that.
But 25 years ago, they probably.
Well, these things were not as well monitored is the wrong word, but well understood, and the technology wasn't good enough. I know personally, I've been in work environments that were kind of high security would be a way to say it, and so your monitor was watched. And screen captures were remotely taken of your monitor.
Yeah.
And we had employees who said, listen, I have epilepsy. You can't take screen grabs of my screen because when they did, the screen capture would cause the monitor to do a little flash.
Yeah.
And that would be enough to set this person off. And so the company couldn't do it. So it was, I can see if you're not used to it, this rule had been made until this one guy came along and said, hi. Can't do that to me.
Right.
And so everybody's testing it. It's fine. And then, we didn't think about that.
But it still is a little strange because, okay, what happens is the game is very popular. One kid has an epileptic seizure, which may or may not even be the fault of the game. And they're all like in panic mode and they pull the machines. It's like, really?
I guess I think it makes sense to me, honestly. Even the scaremongering that happens with like current video games where people say like, oh, if you play this game that has guns in it, you're going to become a murderer, and that I think is kind of the same situation where you have this game that's out for a week and it's technology that people don't really understand. And some kid, whether he has epilepsy or not, has a seizure or has an adverse reaction to it. The technology is so new. People are just going to say that thing did it.
Right.
That is that thing's fault.
There is always that possibility. Although at the same time, I know when I was a kid, there were always kids that we knew who were just spazzes. And so it's like, no credibility.
But again, like everything else, it's peppered with doubt.
Well,
one of the
things I'm interested in finding out, and it didn't occur to me till now to actually check this out, is that have there ever been any video game manufacturers based in South America?
Surely.
I'm sure. I don't know that they weren't the manufacturer as far as I can tell. It sounded like they were, what was it? How did Roach put it? Let me grab this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the Xenocelestum was basically him and some friends who were programmers.
Right.
So it sounds like they developed some software, but it doesn't sound like it does not sound like they had the capability to actually produce hardware.
No, but again, if it's a South American company, it could have been some group that just said, an investment group of some kind. So they went to some other country and said, I need you to make me this hardware. They went to another country and said, I need you to build this cabinet.
Yeah, perhaps.
It could have been just piecemealed out so that when it got time to do it, no two people that were involved in opposite sides knew the other.
Right.
I mean, that's how cells work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's quite possible.
Yeah.
So Roach goes on to talk about, though, he says, okay, well, this whole thing about Men in Black, I can tell you who that was. That was all the execs and all the investors who were panicking and came flocking to the area to deal with this event, this seizure that this boy had, and to try to mitigate the impact of it. So now they're all hanging around the arcade, and they're all nervously staring at the machine and talking. Of course, everybody's like, what's that bunch of dudes doing?
Yeah.
So it could be as simple as a misinterpretation. They're staring, going, oh, God, don't play it, don't play it, don't play it. The kids are like, why is that guy staring at me while I'm playing the game?
Yeah.
I mean, if a kid had a seizure in an arcade, there's nothing that anybody could do to keep that out of the newspaper.
It's true. And let's face it, this is kind of a slow moving town. So I mean,
at that time,
there it still is. It still
Billy
is.
had
It's
a
like,
seizure.
I mean, yeah.
Well, but they also, they were saying that like there was this massive fear mongering that happened, right? There was this massive scare that happened.
Well, but I want to pull back on that because it may have been fear mongering amongst the company and the investors panicking.
That's fair.
Rather than the public.
That's fair. That's
so
totally
it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the other problem is that we can't find any record of this boy, but a settlement out of court was made evidently with his family. So there's going to be no lawsuit on record because they just did it under the table, essentially.
And I'm sure that they signed do not,
right, non-disclosure agreements. You have to when you do that stuff.
Yeah, so they've never been able to talk about it.
Yeah, and Rick says that they were trying to, basically after that, he and his buddies, they disbanded the company they made because they just wanted to distance themselves from this whole thing. This thing just fell apart. It was terrible. And like, no, we don't want to keep making stuff and be haunted by this ghost forever.
Yeah, but the thing that I find less credible about this is he published his little thing in 2006. So the cultural difference between America in 2006 and 1981 is, number one, in 1981 we weren't such a litigious society. And in 1981, and I was alive back in those days. I know that if for example, I was playing a video game and I had an epileptic seizure, my parents probably wouldn't think about suing the company that made it. They would just assume I had an epileptic fit. You probably wouldn't find a lawyer to take the case because, the lawyer would just say, the jury's going to laugh at you. Your kid has epilepsy.
Well, I guess,
through the lens of 2006 litigious America, this sort of panicking on the part of the company makes sense. But in 1981, it doesn't make sense.
I guess so. The counter to that is that, for instance, my brother, who does not have epilepsy, has had 2 seizures in his life.
Yeah.
And, both of them were by outside sources, and that happens to people. So I think that, we've been saying it's an epileptic fit. Well, maybe he just had a seizure. Maybe he, because some people that just happens every once in a while. You don't have epilepsy. But if this game if something has given
something has happened
something, so I think
external
that
stimulus.
Even in the 80s, if your kid isn't sick and then suddenly they have something horrible happen to them, maybe they're not going to go through we're going to sue you for $1 million, but probably the company is going to be like, listen, let's just deal with this right now.
No, maybe,
but
maybe
I don't
not.
know. It's hard to tell
because,
with situations like that.
Again, the kid is in an arcade, which has got dozens of other arcade machines in it, which he's obviously been playing on. So any one of those, and it could have been that he just had recently consumed just minutes before 36 popsicles or something like that. It could have been all kinds of things that caused a seizure.
Case of Coca-Cola or something.
Yeah,
sure, and that's definitely possible. But I think if it's the startup, whatever, Nobody really knows what they're doing. They're experimenting with new visuals that people haven't really seen before. I think that the tendency for a company to panic is greater when they're kind of experimenting in this sort of situation. But, again, we're having exactly the debate that everybody's having online.
Well, again, I think again, actually, when it's not a startup, when they're a really big company, then they're typically seen as a deep pocket by attorneys. But when they're just a startup with not a lot of capital or anything like that, they're not really a worthy target because they don't have any money to take from.
True.
Sure.
True. Well, let's move farther into the information that we get from Stephen Roach.
Oh yeah, more about Roach.
Okay.
So according to Roach, and his explanation is difficult, and I'm actually going to try and read this verbatim to describe this to everyone, but this is how he says the game was played. And again, personally, this game sounds lame, the way he describes it. But the game is centered around a moon base, which he says is largely plagiarized from Star Wars, which displayed a number.
That doesn't. What's that mean exactly?
I'm guessing there was a number in the middle of the moon base.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's get farther in. I think this will help clarify a little bit more. So there are 6 sets of different aliens. The first, which varied through 6 levels, appears as random waves sent out from the moon base and need to be destroyed. The others were numbered between 1 and 10, which had to be repelled back to the base to lower the total. The figure you had to match exactly to clear the level, otherwise you lose 2 lives or just 1 if you have 1 remaining. So if I understand the way he's saying this correctly, the moon base, let's say, comes up with number 55, and a ship comes at you and it says 5, and you bounce it back into the base. It sounded to me like you were trying to get the moon base to drop back down to 0 by pushing numbers back into it.
Like a mix between a shooter game and a math game.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how he says, and he goes on to give out some more stuff, which makes the description even more convoluted and difficult to follow. And I just don't want to read it because it doesn't logically make sense to me.
Sure.
But what he does say is that the longer a specific level goes on, the faster the game gets, which we've all seen in every video game that we've ever played.
Kind of all that way.
But as you go longer, the screen, the lights begin to flash. And if you beat the game, the screen rapidly flashes, puts up the word Polybius, and evidently says Polybius. And I'm guessing it probably is in that prototypical video, Polybius, that deep-throated weird voice that they always had in old video games, which, if this kid beat the game and it's rapid flashing, could be what caused the seizure.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me that they would have rapid flashing, right? You blew up the moon. It's the representation of the explosion of said moon.
Yeah, and
right?
let's face it, graphics weren't too sophisticated back in those days. So
it says Polybius. Based on that description, I can see how somebody could have a seizure from it. But I can also, it does kind of sound like a lame game, but I can also... when I was a kid and playing like Math Rabbit or whatever, like you get addicted to those things because, you just in your mind, you just are competitive and you think, well, if I just play it again, maybe this time I'll do better. Well, and it just feeds on itself.
I played the crap out of Asteroids. I played the holy heck out of the Star Wars game.
Yeah.
The one that was a total vector base. To this day, if I see that game, I'll play it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't help myself. I got to drop 50 cents in and play it.
Yeah, listen, there are games. This is how there's that bar downtown called Ground Control, which is like an adult arcade.
Yes.
And like there are games there that like nobody ever wants to play, but I'm sitting there playing them.
Do they
like drunk. Like I've got a couple beers in me. I'm just like playing it, just shoving quarters in, and there's no reason for it except for that I can't pass them up.
Yeah.
Because you remember them.
Favorite games.
Yeah.
They're nostalgic.
So, by the way, do they have Asteroids there?
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, damn,
They
I got to go
totally
down
do.
there.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I played Asteroids.
I mean, so it's one of those games that you think like empirically, you're like, wow, it sounds boring. But then you like get into it and you're like, oh, man.
This is so fun and so hard. But if you do this, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, it's completely plausible.
Yeah, and the thing that I always say about like again, I'm a little bit nerding out here, but like video games of the past versus video games of now, right? Video games of the past, you had to hate before you could love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great thing to say about a game like this, where like you would hate this game. You would hate it, but you wouldn't want it to beat you. So you'd go back and play it and play it and play it. And I can see how people would just get
Or you'd
obsessed.
watch that one guy who was really good, somehow figured it out, and then you couldn't help but watch him play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
Yeah,
I can see just based on that description. That description's far more interesting to me than any of the other
Things that we've seen.
Yeah. I mean, really, like, okay, cool. It's like shooting some asteroids or whatever. Fine. But like you have to keep track of the number and like you have to hit the right numbers back and then also dodge the ships and then also shoot the like waves, and also the graphics are really cool and new.
Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me again, because like you're supposed to knock back the ships. The ships come out with numbers. Am I correct?
Not all of them. Some come out without, and you got to kill.
Yeah.
Some come out with a number, and you got to bounce.
You got to
them back.
knock them back in there. So and the number has to match exactly. Which means that if say you're at like the random number generated was 33, and you knocked back like 5 ships who totaled 30. So that means the number is at 3 right now.
Mm-hmm.
And a ship comes out and it's got the number 4 on it.
So you dodge it.
So you dodge it, but then it gets past you, and that doesn't it start shooting at you?
No, surely it just continues, right? Those I don't think are probably.
Or maybe you can destroy them. I don't know.
Maybe
But
you
here's
just
the
destroy them.
problem.
I don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We know nothing. We could sit here for another hour and talk about plausible
that's a good
ways
point.
this game could
Yeah.
run.
That's a good
but
point.
We don't know. And the worst part is that's the end of the information we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got the internet legend. We've got some details that people seem to repeat, but I can't validate. We've got a story by Roach, which sounds plausible, and I can see credence in bits and pieces of it, but I can't. None of it stitches together, and this is probably the loosest bit of. This is the loosest story we've done yet.
Yeah.
Because it's all over the map.
Yeah, and personally, I find no reason whatsoever to believe Stephen Roach, and also I think we've gone on long enough. It's time to solve the mystery.
Oh, Joe knows the answer, apparently.
What is the answer, Joe?
Well, it's pretty freaking obvious. Okay, this was a Defense Department experiment to create a video game. And the idea was to create a video game that would cause people to completely spaz, go insane, kill themselves. The idea was that once they had perfected this and tested it, then they would airdrop like millions of these in hostile countries like Iran, North Korea, whatever, and totally decimate their populations. So they
Because
put
they've
out
been busy playing the game.
So they put out a beta version in Portland, and
it failed.
And the only thing they get is one kid who spazzes out and has an epileptic fit, so a major disappointment. So they pulled it, and then they put them in a huge warehouse somewhere, like the one you see at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they still are. And that's it. That was the end of the experiment. They decided it was like, they just couldn't create a video game that would cause people to spaz out and kill themselves.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I personally, my personal opinion
Yeah.
is that I think that it may have been real, but I don't think it was real in terms of the actual incarnation that we hear about in all of the stories. I think that it probably is, this is an amalgamation of several stories, of several games that have been merged together through the mishmash of the internet.
Sure.
There's enough concrete or solid, believable information here that I'm willing to run with it. I just don't think that Polybius was real.
No,
I
probably
think that
not.
it was beta versions of Tempest or Battlezone or any of these other games that are out there, or games that we don't even know of because they just faded from the memory of the social group. Is that I think that it's just a bunch of them stitched together.
That's fair.
I think that, actually, if you were to look for a credible version of the whole thing, it's like if you can imagine some nerd that hung out in game arcades back in those days, and this game shows up, and it's put out in a few places, not just his, but and it turns out
That's a needle in a haystack.
Well, yeah,
to
but
find that guy.
No, but what I mean is like, so this guy is like witnessing the arrival of this game from nowhere. And it's really popular with him and his dorky friends. And it's like they really like it a lot. But it turns out it's not. It's totally a dead letter in every other arcade they put it in.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of weeks go by, and maybe randomly some kid has an epileptic seizure while he's in the arcade. Then the game gets pulled because it's obviously a failure, because aside from this guy and his nerdy friends, nobody else likes it or plays it. So they pull it, and that's the end of that. And then this guy,
Years
later, he's like,
tacks it on to the end of this other legend.
Yeah, it's like, no, and this guy years later says, I can't believe this. This arcade game shows up, and everybody was nuts about it, meaning him and his friends. And then somebody has an epileptic fit, and then they pull the game, and that was it. The whole thing just went down the memory hole. But no, maybe it was just purely a game that sucked, and nobody wanted to play it.
Maybe.
And so they pulled it out.
What do you think, Deb?
I don't know what I think.
No?
I do. I think that there's...
You're taking my stance?
Yeah.
My normal stance?
No,
for the last
yeah,
couple of
I
weeks?
really am, actually. I think that there's a lot of stuff that's great in this story, and I think there's a lot of stuff that's pure crap in this story. You guys know, and you probably, listeners, now know, based on my, little rants, I'm really passionate about video games. I really like them. And, the fact that there are so many things that I almost want to be true.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't decide either way whether it existed or not. And I do think that since we do have the pleasure of living in Portland, maybe we can find a little more about it, but probably not. I think that if that stuff was to be found, it'd be on the internet already. It'd be part of the story.
Maybe.
Because, I think this is the thing about internet. People speculate and they cut and paste and make stuff up. But if any of these people are out there that are actually busily obsessing over this topic, they would have done a couple of things. They would have looked for a South American software company that was specialized in video games. They would have gone through the Oregonians archives. They would have looked in German records, because there's got to be at least one nerd out there in Germany who's following this intensely, who could actually look in public records to see if a company was ever incorporated called Zinneschlossen. No, and nobody's done this. Yeah,
it's hard to say.
Yeah,
hard to say.
But
well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave this one unsolved, urban legendish.
Likely to be permanently unsolved.
Maybe permanently. But that having been said, if you'd like to go ahead and check out some of the links for some of the research that we did for the show, you can go ahead and check that out on our website. The website is, of course, thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. Mm-hmm. You can listen to the show right there on that website. You can also go ahead and listen to the show on iTunes if you want to go ahead and download, and probably most of you that download do it through iTunes. Got a couple of minutes, go ahead and leave us that comment as well, because that's what helps other people find us.
Absolutely.
If you're on the go and you realize that a new show has come out and you forgot to download it, well, of course, you can find us on Stitcher, which is available on just about every internet-capable device. You can stream it right there. You can always go ahead and send us an email. So if you've got thoughts on this particular episode, or stories that we've got on the site, or stories you'd like to hear, any of the above or anything else, go ahead and you can send us an email. Our email address is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. And as a matter of fact...
Yeah, we have some listener comments.
Are they good?
Well, it's good. Basically what it is there's this little website called Reddit, and
little one.
It's tiny. But we actually got a message there from a user. Anyways, he really likes our show. He looped us in with a bunch of other really awesome podcasts.
Cool.
And also suggested a podcast topic for us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which we're definitely going to get to. But I just thought we'd give him a little shout out because, I like hearing great things about our show. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I don't care.
So it's good to know. And you said he gave us a story to look into.
Yeah, the Montauk Project, which is, I think, going to be a lot of research.
Okay, yeah, I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy.
A conspiracy?
Oh, yeah. Right, so Joe might have to take that.
Joe will have to take that.
I just might have to take that one.
So, 0-18, thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We appreciate that.
Seriously, dude or dudette, whichever you are, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I guess I just assumed you were a dude, but you could be a chick.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, that having been said, once again, thanks for slogging through this one with us, ladies and
Gosh,
gentlemen. I
it's
know this.
long.
We didn't think this was going to be turned into as big of an episode as it obviously has, but I hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah.
And we'll come back at you next week with something completely unrelated to today's show and completely interesting.
And
Until then, we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
It was aliens.
Yeah.
How is it
Chupacabra.
aliens.
I don't
No, I don't want to. I don't want to.